A satanic symbol has been put up in Boca Raton. It's on public property in Sanborn Square next to a nativity scene and other Christmas decorations. It says, "In Satan we trust," and it was put there by someone from the Freedom from Religion Foundation. And that person has a permit for it.
The death toll from a 6.5 magnitude earthquake in Indonesia's Aceh province has risen to 102. The country's National Disaster Management Agency says more than 130 have serious injuries and 3,200 have been evacuated. The agency says more than 1,000 personnel, including military officers and volunteers, have been deployed to help in search and rescue operations. Wednesday's quake was the biggest disaster to hit Aceh since the Indian Ocean tsunami of 2004, which killed more than 120,000 people in the Indonesian province alone.
These are the shattered remains of what was a building, its collapse shocking people who lived through it. They had fled outdoors for safety after feeling a powerful earthquake. It was followed by many aftershocks in Aceh. The damage is extensive, with many homes and markets ripped apart. Dozens of people have been killed and many more injured. The quake has caused roads to cave in and trapped vehicles, making it more difficult for emergency teams to reach places where their help has been needed. Fear of aftershocks has led many people to seek sanctuary in shelters. Others had their homes destroyed and spent the night on the roadside or in their vehicles. A few chose to return to inspect their damaged homes, only to find a pile of debris. Meanwhile, relief agencies are clearing the rubble, looking for bodies and survivors.
We estimate the number of casualties will continue to rise, as some of the residents are still likely under the rubble of the buildings. The search and rescue operation is still underway.
Early Thursday, a 7.8 magnitude earthquake hit close to the Solomon Islands, putting the nation and others in the South Pacific on alert for tsunami waves. According to the Pacific Tsunami Warning Center, tsunami waves are possible in the next 3 hours along some coasts of the Solomon Islands, Vanuatu, Papua New Guinea, Nauru, New Caledonia, Tuvalu, and Kosrae. Minutes after the major quake, another magnitude 5.5 hit in the same area. Another 6.8 earthquake has been reported about 100 miles off the coast of Eureka, near the Oregon border, at about 6:50 a.m. Thursday morning. This just after at least 102 people in Indonesia were killed when a 6.5 magnitude quake rocked the area Wednesday morning.
The South Pacific is under a tsunami alert following a 7.8 magnitude earthquake that struck close to the Solomon Islands early Friday. The Pacific Tsunami Warning Center said, based on available data, hazardous tsunami waves are forecast for some coastal areas. The earthquake hit less than 30 kilometers off the island of Makira, home to more than 500,000 people. The quake triggered power outages and shocked residents who described the tremor as intense and long-lasting.
14 people have been killed and one remains missing following severe flooding in southern Thailand. The Interior Ministry said in a statement that over 500,000 people have been affected by 6 days of floods. And Meteorological Department forecasts heavy rain to come within the next 7 days for southern regions. The south is a popular destination for tourists due to its scenic islands and beaches, and floods are expected to have an impact on what is generally the area's most profitable tourism season, which runs from November to February.
A cracking ice shelf encourages Britain to move its Antarctic research station about 14 miles inland. It will be the first time the Halley VI research station is relocated since its completion in 2012. The station is used to gather information on space weather, climate change, and atmospheric phenomena. Each of the facility's 8 modules will be towed out of harm's way over the next 3 years, giving scientists enough time to complete ongoing research at the existing site. In 2013, the British Antarctic Survey discovered a growing chasm in East Antarctica's floating 150-meter thick Brunt ice shelf that had previously been dormant for 35 years. The crack is about 4.3 miles inland from the station. If it continues to crack, it would put the station at risk of being severed off from the rest of the ice shelf. Scientists have been conducting research on the same ice shelf since 1956. It's where the Antarctic ozone hole was discovered in 1985.
The tallest land mammal is now on the extinction watch list. The world's population of giraffes has plunged about 40% over the last 30 years. This is according to a conservation advocacy group. Now, reasons for that drastic decline are increasing human population, habitat loss, civil unrest, as well as illegal hunting.
Fight against hunger needs to be mainly fought in the Asia-Pacific region of the world, where 60% of the world's hunger occurs. In recent years, several countries have lost access to resources, and the amount of people going hungry has grown. This is true for both the Philippines and Afghanistan. The UN wants to end world hunger by 2030, but they say this won't happen unless help is given to those in the Asia-Pacific regions. Kundabi Kadirasan, Assistant Director General of the UNFAO, stated, "The analysis in this report is an eye-opener and a wake-up call to all of us here in Asia and the Pacific."
For the first time in decades, life expectancy for Americans has decreased. According to new data from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, the overall life expectancy for the U.S. population dropped from 78.9 years in 2014 to 78.8 years in 2015. That might seem like a pretty small difference on paper, but it has researchers worried about Americans' health and well-being. As one expert told NPR, this is a big deal. There's not a better indicator of well-being than life expectancy. It's remarkable. There are lots of things about this that are unexpected. Scientists believe a spike in 8 of the top 10 leading causes of death are to blame.
A new report on Christians in the UK suggests anti-discrimination laws are being used as a weapon to suppress religious freedom. The independent think tank Respublica issued a report analyzing how laws like the 2010 Equality Act led to suppressed religious liberty. One example is the case of the Asher's Bakery, where the owners refused to make a cake for a gay wedding and were found guilty of discrimination.
Thousands of impassioned Muslims protesting in Jakarta, calling for their Christian governor to go, after being accused of an affront on what they hold sacred.
Tangkap Ahok, karena emang apalagi sekarang sudah dibuktikan dia sudah menjadi tersangka.
Basuki Cahaya Purnama, better known as Ahok, is facing criminal charges for insulting the Quran. In a campaign speech in September, Ahok said Islamic groups were using a verse in the Quran to deceive voters into thinking Muslims shouldn't be led by non-Muslims. Ahok later apologised, saying he didn't intend to cause offence.
Kita ini negara hukum, ya taat hukum saja. Ya kan, kalau saya memang ditetapkan jadi tersangka, ya saya akan jalani proses hukum. Ya kan, kalau memang sampai kita dinyatakan salah atau tidak, harus proses hukum. Tapi saya yakin saya tidak salah, nggak ada niat saya kok.
But the comment caused mass protests and calls for him to be imprisoned. They've been largely peaceful, although last month a demonstration did turn violent. For Ahok's supporters, the accusations of blasphemy have an ulterior motive. His ally, Indonesia's President Joko Widodo, accuses political actors of exploiting the situation, inciting anger to sabotage Ahok's run for a second term in February. Since succeeding Widodo as governor in 2014, Ahok has been opposed by the Islamic Defenders Front, who don't want him, a Christian, as a leader of the majority Muslim capital. This case has renewed wider concerns about Indonesia's blasphemy law. Human rights groups say it is used to discriminate against minorities, and rather than protecting religious freedom, it is increasingly breeding religious intolerance.
Simmering tribal animosity has been haunting Ethiopia for decades. This traditional gathering was the significant turning point of what was essentially a single-issue protest.
After the protests began in Ginchi town, hundreds of Oromo students have been killed within almost a year. We've lost many intellectuals. Others are incarcerated for claiming their rights. As you've witnessed in this festival, thousands of Oromos are chanting for freedom. Our students, political leaders, intellectuals, and many of our young people are in prison. We need freedom in this country.
What began as a day of jubilation descended into a formidable mass anti-authoritarian movement. Bullets fired into the crowd of up to 2 million people. The stampede that followed brought the country's civil unrest into the global arena.
Hundreds of people died in this incident. I would estimate 500 people died or were injured and sent to different health centers. We are searching for more dead bodies.
In Cameroon, police have shot dead 4 anti-government demonstrators in one of the Central African nation's minority Anglophone regions. It's part of ongoing protests against alleged discrimination against minority English-speaking residents. Officers initially tried to break up the demonstration using tear gas. A Reuters reporter then claims police opened fire on the crowd, which had grown in size. Protests first broke out in early November in Bamenda when lawyers and teachers demanded better working conditions. It's a rare act of defiance against President Paul Biya, who has ruled Cameroon since 1982. The government has initiated several attempts to hold a dialogue with the protesters, who are demanding a separation from Francophone Cameroon.
More than 1,000 protesters gathered outside the South Korean parliament to urge lawmakers to vote in favour of impeaching the president. They got their wish. They passed the impeachment bill in the growing row over an influence peddling scandal. Park Geun-hye could now become the country's first democratically elected leader to be ousted from office. Park's accused of colluding with a friend and a former aide to pressure big businesses to donate to 2 foundations set up to back her policy initiatives. She's denied any wrongdoing but has apologised for carelessness in her ties with her friend. The scandals led to mass rallies every Saturday for the past 6 weeks calling for Park to quit. Opinion polls show overwhelming public support for her impeachment. The Constitutional Court must now decide whether to uphold the motion and remove Park from office or reject it and reinstate her.
Just a couple hours later, the passing of the motion to impeach President Park Geun-hye is already making headlines around the world. Correspondents from international news agencies, including CNN and Al Jazeera, cover the voting process live and immediately reporting the result. The foreign press is calling the impeachment a stunning and swift fall for the country's first female leader amid protests that led millions of people to take the streets. The New York Times even noted that the scandal provided the latest example of how corruption and influence peddling still remain a pressing concern in Korea's top political and corporate society. China's foreign ministry spokesperson said in a statement that although the impeachment motion is Korea's internal matters and not China's to meddle with, Beijing wishes the political situation in Seoul to get back to normal as soon as possible. The Japanese government has not showed an official response yet. But as President Park's powers are now suspended as the Constitutional Court deliberates on the past impeachment motion, Tokyo is expected to be attentive at how things develop from now on, especially after the 2 countries recently signed the General Security of Military Information Agreement.
Syrian military sources say Israel has launched rocket attacks targeting a military airport near the Syrian capital Damascus. The ground-to-ground missiles were reportedly launched from inside the occupied territories and hit Mazeh airport west of Damascus. The rockets triggered a fire, but no casualties have been reported so far. The Israeli military has not commented on the report. It was the second such attack by Israel over the past week. On November the 30th, Israeli jets fired 2 missiles from Lebanese airspace towards the outskirts of Damascus.
Our ally China says it needs more nukes to deal with Donald Trump. Now, this is an editorial coming out of China's Global Times newspaper. It says extra defense is required should the U.S. treat Beijing unacceptably. What the heck does that threat even mean? The paper goes on to say that China should significantly increase military spending and build more nuclear weapons as a response to comments made by the president-elect Donald Trump on the country's policies. So China has gone full SJW, and words will indeed hurt you, and they're threatening us with nuclear weapons. Now, this paper is not part of the official state media, but it does have close ties to the ruling Communist Party there in China. And they also were not too happy with Trump's phone call to the president of Taiwan. Now, Beijing regards Taiwan as a rogue province awaiting unification. So the Global Times goes on to say that we need to get better prepared militarily regarding the Taiwan question to ensure that those who advocate Taiwan's independence will be punished. And they also want to take precautions in case of U.S. provocations in the South China Sea. Needless to say, it sounds like the Chinese Communist Party is remaining a little pessimistic about U.S. relations once President-elect Donald Trump takes office. But speaking of international relations, Iran has opened up a new kiddie theme park. It's actually a sinister war-based theme park, which instead of roller coasters and roundabouts, has military checkpoints and AK-47s. The City of Games for Revolutionary Children lets youngsters dress up in full combat gear and pretend to be attacking Iran's enemies, like Israel and the West.
Nigeria's military, meanwhile, has pledged to take action against any of its soldiers found guilty of raping internally displaced persons in the northeast. The military has decided to investigate the allegations following a Human Rights Watch report. The humanitarian body claims several internally displaced Nigerians have reported sexual abuse at the hands of the soldiers deployed to protect them from the Boko Haram insurgency. Kelechi Mekalam has more.
The Human Rights Watch report detailing accounts of rape and sexual abuse was published in October. The organization says that 4 of the 43 women interviewed claimed outright rape by Nigerian soldiers. Another 37 say they were duped into sex with promises of marriage and financial benefits. When they fell pregnant, the women say they were abandoned. Human Rights Watch reports that in most cases, the victims were ordered to remain silent. Initially, the military rejected the allegations, but the report has caught President Muhammadu Buhari's eye. He's demanded an investigation. Now the military has made a U-turn, promising to punish any soldier found culpable. The Director of Information at Nigeria's Defense Headquarters in Abuja, Brigadier General Rabi Abubakar, says the military isn't taking the allegations lightly. He says those found guilty would be dismissed from the army. These claims of sexual abuse aren't new. A survey by an independent research firm shows 66% of 400 displaced people in Adamawa, Borno and Yobe states report the camp officials sexually abuse and rape the women and girls seeking shelter there.
Now, austerity in the EU is not only affecting Greece, but it's also being felt in neighboring Spain. Increased inequalities between the rich and poor have left some of the country's most vulnerable out in the cold. Some 6 million Spaniards cannot pay their electricity bills. And the recent death of an 81-year-old woman after her apartment caught fire has sparked outrage in Spain. Jaime Velázquez reports.
Ivan was a construction worker until he was laid off midway through Spain's economic crisis. He now lives in a small flat with his wife and 4 children. It's a struggle day in, day out to keep that roof over their heads.
In this neighborhood, we are working people, heads of family who have had the money, and suddenly they have nothing. They have reached a point where they are about to be evicted from their homes.
Ivan barely manages to pay the rent and is left with nothing to pay the bills with. So like many other houses in the block, he has connected his home to the grid illegally.
Meet Guy Ehrlich, visionary, farmer, and possible provider of plants needed for incense for a future third temple.
This is the Balm of Gilead farm. This is the nursery. The vision was to grow the Balm of Gilead and then to make an industry out of it.
Ehrlich's still in the early stages, but already he's helping turn the desert green on a tract of land near the Dead Sea and Jericho.
Over the years, I built a collection of rare biblical and medical plants, and I understood that there are some very interesting plants in my collection that have a huge potential to benefit humanity.
It started with the balsamone tree, better known as the Balm of Gilead. For 1,000 years, ancient Hebrew farmers in this area were the only ones known in the world to cultivate this exotic plant. They used it for medicinal and cosmetic purposes. Now Ehrlich's biotech venture is reviving that trade and more.
He knew how to make out of it the most important medicine of the ancient world, a perfume that was considered to be the best perfume in the Roman Empire. It says it's the first ingredient of the incense of the Holy Temple, and since the Second Temple period, it says it was the anointing oil of the kings of Israel. At the 6th century, it disappeared from here together with the Jewish people.
Ehrlich got his first plant from a shoot that was smuggled by a German scientist out of Saudi Arabia and brought to Israel. Oddly enough, the plants he grows are thriving in the intense heat and salty soil on the shores of the Dead Sea.
I believe that in the future it will become a medicine. Before it will be a medicine, it will be a nutraceutical for cosmetics. And before or after, it might serve as the first ingredient for the incense of the temple.
Ehrlich has 6 acres of balm of Gilead trees so far, and another 5,000 plants ready to be planted.
Right now, I'm the only and the biggest balm of Gilead farmer in the world.